I know what you're thinking. Why do I have an Instapot down here as well as an electric kettle? Well, today we are going to talk about chain waxing. So some of you guys just heard that phrase chain waxing, and you're probably having one of two reactions. And the first one is curiosity, and that's typically my first response. Some other people are responding, that's just a waste of time. I did that in the 80s. Why are you bothering doing this for such marginal gains? Speaking of which, I should probably start the Instapot. This is going to be a long video. First off, I've got some hardened chain wax in here. That is what's in this Instapot container. If you're going to go this route, get 2 containers, one for food only and one for shenanigans. Just put it in there. I'm going to put it in saute mode, and I'm going to put it in medium just to get things melting a little bit faster. So back to the waxing thing. I'm going to start off and say that this is absolutely not for everybody. So in this video, I thought I'd share with you my reasons why I'm doing it, why you shouldn't do it, and the results thus far. So whenever I mention chain waxing on the social internets, probably the first comment that people say is, it's pointless, marginal gains. To which I would respond that I'm not really interested in, whatever speed gains there may be in using chain wax. What I am interested in, however, is how waxing your chain supposedly extends the life of your chain and your drivetrain. Some people say they are getting 2 to 3 times the life on a chain. We're talking like 7,000, 10,000 miles per chain, which in turn means you're wearing your chainring less and your cassette less. And with the state of the world today, with the parts shortage and the general price hike of all components, that to me seems like a really compelling reason. So again, I have zero interest in the speed gains, but do have lots of interest in its supposed lengthening of life of the chain. This thing is making sounds. Should poke it a little bit. Okay. The second biggest complaint I hear about chain waxing is that it's kind of a pain in the butt, and I'm going to agree, it's really kind of a pain in the butt. And it's not so much the waxing part. The waxing part is actually the easiest part of the entire process. It's cleaning the chain, it's cleaning the cassette, the drivetrain, and preparing that whole system for waxing. Ooh, it's really starting to bubble. I'm going to probably lower the saute. Don't want to burn the wax. So I 100% agree that it is a pain to go through the whole process, and it's probably not for everybody. I definitely didn't think it was for me, and I struggled with it the first few times, but after I got a system down, it wasn't so bad. Yes, it is way more of a time investment than just squeezing some lube on your chain, but hey, it's winter, it's like 20 degrees outside, what am I going to do all day? Okay, it's just starting to liquefy. Still a hard crust on the top there. The third most common comment I get is, I tried that in the past. As if doing something 20 years ago somehow negates doing it in the present. That's like saying I tried the bike with round wheels in the past. Why are you still riding with round wheels? Let's just say that yes, perhaps you tried a version of chain waxing in the past, but technology has changed. There are lots of interesting additives now that people are putting into the wax. So it's not just your homebrew paraffin, although it may include that, but there are some other things going on. So for example, in pretty much all of my chain waxing experiments so far, I've been using the Silka stuff. This is not sponsored. I bought all this with my own money. The stuff in here, not sponsored. The reason I went with Silka is 2 things. One, Josh seems like a super smart guy, and they have lots of videos talking about the science behind what they have put inside their chain wax. And 2, it ranks really highly on the Zero Friction Cycling website. If you're not familiar with Zero Friction Cycling, add him there. I think he's Australian. He does lots of independent testing on all sorts of lubricants and chain waxes, and the Silka stuff ranks pretty high. How the Silka wax is different than, say, your typical homebrew is that they add certain things. I think one of the main components is tungsten disulfide. So these little nanoparticles of tungsten disulfide that are super low friction and get into all the cracks and crevices of everything. So yes, it is wax, but it's also got other things, other science. All that to say that if you have tried chain waxing in the past and didn't like it, didn't see any gains, maybe you should try some of the new stuff and see if it's any different. That's all I'm saying. It's starting to get nice and molten. I'll show you what it looks like. So it's slowly heating up. There's still a really cold crust here, but the wax from the bottom is starting to liquefy and sputter up to the top. I'm going to give you guys an overview of the whole process. There's definitely more in-depth videos, but basically you take your chain, preferably a brand new chain, and you strip it of all of its factory grease. So that means putting it through a couple rounds of degreaser, then denatured alcohol to evaporate all the impurities. And then you do the same with your cassette and your chainring. You want to make it as clean as possible, as antiseptic as possible. When the chain is dry, you should be able to shake it and hear it tinkle because there's nothing in the grooves or in between the rollers. It's got to be clean. And that part is probably the biggest pain in the butt in the whole process. You're dealing with some nasty chemicals, it smells, and you really need a garage or access to an outside space to do it. But once you have it clean, the actual waxing part is pretty simple. The first product I tried was this one. It is the Super Secret chain lube wax from Silka, and it comes in this tub. This is made up of wax, there's special additives, as well as some other things to keep it liquid at room temperature, so it's not a frozen puck. I don't know if you can see here, liquid. What you would do is after your chain is super clean, you dunk it in here, you close it up, and then you give it a shake, a couple minutes, giving it time to make sure that everything has penetrated the rollers and all the nooks and crevices. And then you would hang this up overnight to dry. So the actual waxing part, pretty easy. Once it's fully dried, you take it from wherever you're hanging it, break open the links, reattach it to your bike, and ride. You're happy. After a certain number of miles, you might start to hear the chain start speaking. That's when you have to start re-waxing it. Important thing is once you've waxed a chain, you can't use another kind of oil-based lube. You have to use some wax thing within the same family. So Silka takes this stuff and they put in these little squeeze bottles. And this is what you would use to do that kind of daily maintenance. So after a ride, when you're done, drip this on one link at a time, backpedal a couple times, wipe off the excess, let it cure overnight, and then it's ready to go. All that to say is that you don't have to go through the entire process of removing the chain, running it through degreaser and everything once you've done it once. You just top it off and do a little maintenance with this thing. All right, so you can see it's getting nice and molten now. So that's basically how this stuff works. Again, it's similar to this molten wax, but it has some additives to keep it liquid at room temperature or colder than room temperature. Having done this, you're probably wondering why I'm going through the trouble of getting an Instapot and doing the molten wax method. To answer that, we have to go back a little bit. One of the promises of a wax chain is that it doesn't attract as much dirt as a lube chain, some kind of petroleum-based thing, because it doesn't get sticky or tacky. The reason that's important is because it's all that grit that gets between the rollers that slowly abrades the chain and hence your drivetrain. We're using the cleanliness of a chain and drivetrain as sort of a proxy to help determine the longevity of the system. Cleaner the chain, less grit, less wear, longer life on the chain and the drivetrain. So back to this stuff. I found that this stuff works pretty well, but whatever additive is in here to keep it liquid does seem to attract a little bit more dirt than I would like. After using this for a couple weeks, I thought it worked pretty well, but I wanted to see what is the absolute best case scenario and is it better than this? I did that to a few of my bikes and I found that the results were good enough for me that it merited swapping over chains that I dunked in this into a kind of molten wax system. Still doing maintenance with this stuff, but at least having that base application of the molten wax. That is actually why I'm down here today. We've got Laura's bike up here. Hers is the last bike where I waxed it using the Super Secret in the tub. I'm going to clean off the muck and we'll reapply the chain wax, but with the molten wax. I did all the degreaser and denatured alcohol stuff weeks ago. And they say once you have a chain that's waxed, all you have to do to clean it is pour some boiling water over it. So hence the tea kettle. I'm going to remove the chain, I'll boil up some water, run it over the chain through a sieve, do the same thing with the cassette, and we'll see what it looks like. All right, so we're back. I cleaned the chain, ran some hot boiling water over it, and it was actually still really greasy. So something is up because it was way dustier than it should have been, even compared to other bikes using this. So I suspect at some point, either I or Laura must have put some Tri-Flow on the chain and that's why it was so crusty. So this video was supposed to be about how easy it was to maintain a chain once you pre-waxed it, but I just spent probably the last hour running it through a run of degreaser, denatured alcohol, washing the cassette, all that stuff. So much for that video, but this is life. The chain's been clean, the cassette's been clean, and this is the actual waxing process. Eventually, so basically you get the chain and you put it on a bent spoke, and then you just kind of dip it into the molten wax and give it a couple of shakes. Some people say 20 minutes. You know, Josh from Silka, I think he says like 5 is enough. And this is the key part, really. I've shut off the heat, and now what I'm waiting for is the wax to actually cool before pulling the chain out and hanging it to fully cure. The reason you do this is because when the wax is at its hottest, its most liquid form, that's when you want it to be soaking into all the nooks and crannies of the chain. If you pull it out at this point, it's very fluid and it's just gonna exit from the chain rollers and where you want it to stay. What we're trying to do is wait for it to cool, to start to harden. You'll see the top of the wax start to form a film, and that's when you know you're getting close. So you've got maximum penetration. It's at the optimal viscosity, so it just doesn't run out of everything, and it hardens on the chain where it has to. What I have found in order to speed this process up is to actually take this out of this heating container and just set it out and let the air around it cool it off. So you get something to set the pot on. It's off of the heating element and it's surrounded by cold garage air here. So it should cool down at least a little bit quicker. Now it's just, you know, like waiting for paint to dry. I think temperature wise, you're looking for 140 degrees. So you can see pretty molten, no surface crust. Let's check back in a little bit later. Okay guys, exciting times. Getting close to that magical number of 140. You can already start to see kind of a film starting to build up on the surface. So almost there. So I don't know if you guys can see these lines here. That is the surface crust. You can actually start to see it form. So this means that the wax is moving from its more liquid state into a solid state, and almost time to pull this out. Again, the goal is to pull it out just when it's starting to harden and it's not dripping. So we get maximum penetration and adhesion. That's the key here. Starting to form little wax glaciers. Okay, so 142, you can see that there are these like hardened bubbles. There's definitely more of a solid film on here. So start making some room to pull out the chain, break up those wax glaciers. Super fun, I know. And let's start to slowly pull it out and see what happens. Again, the air here is really cold. We want minimal drippage if we can. It's still a little bit too much drippage for me. Wax is definitely warmer down below. It's the surface stuff that's starting to cool off, so not quite there yet, but we're getting close. Let's try again. It's pretty good. Still too drippy. You totally don't have to be this anal about it, but I figure if you're gonna go through the trouble, you might as well. You know what I mean? Couple drips and bam, you can see that stalactite forming right there. So I think we timed it just about right. We didn't lose too much as I was pulling it out. Most of it has adhered to someplace on the chain. Again, that drip frozen in place. I think I only counted like 5 drops pulling it out. So let's knock this one off. And now I'm just gonna hang this up and it'll be ready to put back on the bike tomorrow. So the chain is hanging up over there. It's no longer dripping because the molten wax is just kind of freezing in place now. I've got the rest of the wax here. Again, it's gonna harden into a giant puck. I bought a separate Instapot container just for wax, so don't use the same one that you use for food, and a little plastic lid. So I'm sure in this whole video I've probably scared off a fair amount of you from ever attempting this because it looks so complicated and there's so many things to keep in mind. If you're gonna do something like this, you really have to love the process and the nerdery behind it and not get too attached to simplicity and to gains necessarily. For me, it's a fun, nerdy thing to do in the evenings. And, you know, worst comes to worst, I've got a really clean bike with a really quiet drivetrain. Whether that makes me faster, I'm not really concerned with that. If it extends the life of the chain and the drivetrain, then I'm super stoked. In my experience so far, I can't really speak to longevity because I've only been doing it for a couple of months. I do find that the chains run fairly quiet, and at the end of a ride, even if it's a muddy and wet one, with a properly waxed chain, running your finger over the chain and drivetrain yields a pretty clean result. And if we take clean as sort of an indicator to tell us that the drivetrain isn't going to wear down prematurely or very quickly, then that's a good sign. When we travel this winter, I probably won't be re-waxing the chains like this. I will bring the tub, however, and the dripper to just do some post-ride maintenance. We'll see how it does because we'll be multiple weeks on the road, riding lots of gravel. We'll see if this is kind of a viable choice if you don't have a home base. So that's it for this video. What do you guys think of this whole chain waxing thing? Are you guys like, no way? Or are you curious about it like I am? Let me know in the comments. Let me know your experiences if you've used any of the Silca stuff or other brands that you recommend. Definitely check out Josh on the Silca YouTube channel. He's like a uber nerd and really goes into the weeds about the different additives they use and the different testing. Also check out the Zero Friction Cycling channel, brand new. Lots of good nerdery about waxing and lubrication and drivetrain wear in general. If you enjoyed this video, found it informative or entertaining, consider supporting the channel by joining us on Patreon, where you get access to lots of cool perks as well as monthly giveaways, guys. Pretty sweet things we're giving away. No Instapots, unfortunately, but other cool bike stuff. And as always, keep the supple side down.